Hello, and welcome to another episode of Connect, the monthly series where we bring in experts, innovators, and community members and together explore themes of loneliness, social connection, and healthy aging across Massachusetts. I'm your host, Sandra Harris, the State President for AARP Massachusetts and co-leader of the Task Force to End Loneliness and Build Community. The 193rd session of the Massachusetts Legislature is off and running, welcoming in 5 new state senators and 22 new state representatives as they begin the business of the people. They will debate issues that have become bills, and if approved by both houses and the governor, the bills will become law in Massachusetts. I don't know about you, but when I think about the legislative process, what comes to my mind is the neatly linear path of a bill as described in the iconic Schoolhouse Rock, "I'm Just a Bill." The process begins with we, the people, calling attention to issues that matter to them. These issues are then presented to legislators who introduce them as bills. In this episode, we look at issues that have made it through the long journey to become a bill and are now sitting in committee, as well as others still on their way to becoming bills. Today, we look at bills that will impact older adults and healthy aging in the Commonwealth. Jessica Costantino will help walk us through those bills we want to pay attention to in this legislative session. Jess serves as the Director of Advocacy for AARP Massachusetts. She's responsible for state and federal level advocacy and government relationships. Jess lobbies on a wide variety of issues, including health care, consumer protections, caregiving, financial security, and food and hunger. But before we get started, and in full disclosure, I remind you that I am the volunteer state president for AARP Massachusetts. I choose to volunteer for AARP because its mission, purpose, and values are closely aligned with my own. And I'm honored to advocate for issues that are important to people 50 plus, making sure their voices are heard on matters that matter to them. Welcome, Jess. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Good. Before we get started, why don't you tell us about AARP? What is AARP? What is their mission? And how many members do you have?
Well, Sandra, AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization for people aged 50 and over. We have almost 38 million members across the nation and 780,000 here in the Commonwealth alone. And so what we do is a variety of things, but they kind of fall into a couple of areas: education and outreach, and advocacy at the state and federal level on issues that matter to older persons and their families.
Can you give us some examples of what AARP does and what it does not do?
Of course. AARP, because we are nonpartisan, we don't engage in partisan activities. That means we don't give money to candidates or political parties, and we don't have a political action committee, also known as a PAC, but we do engage with policymakers and legislators on the issues that matter, and we try to get those passed into law so that our members and their families can have the dignity that they want to have to age in their community and in their home, which is really what they've told us they want.
We often see the phrase AARP as wise friend and fierce defender. What does that mean?
Well, I think it means what AARP's founder really thought of when she started the organization. Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus started AARP to fight for programs and services to help people age with dignity, and also to defend things that would help them do that. Now, it's been a long time. We've been an organization for nearly more than 60 years, in fact, but what we know is that we still have a way to go. to make the perfect world for everybody as they age. So we've got some room for improvement.
I remember her so well in the history. Can you tell us about the chicken coop story and how that all started?
Sure. So the story as it goes is that Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, who was a retired school principal, went to find a former colleague of hers, and she went to a big house and was looking for the woman. It's the address she had, and they told her to go around back. And she went around back, and someone pointed her to someplace even further in the back when they asked where the former colleague lived. And then further she went, and finally upon a chicken coop where she landed, she found her former colleague living. Why? Because she didn't have health insurance and financial security to age, and so she lived in a chicken coop. And Dr. Andrus made a decision then and there to change that. And her motto, and AARP's motto, is to serve and not be served. Every day we take that lead and drive for policies and outcomes, education and outreach that makes a difference for people here in the Commonwealth and across the nation.
Oh, Jess, thanks so much for telling that story. I find it always so inspiring.
She was an amazing woman. She did many, many things, including starting the National Retired Teachers Association and starting AARP, all after the time she retired.
Oh, how impressive is that?
How impressive.
Let's talk very briefly about the evolution of the American Association of Retired Professors, and it's no longer what we call ourselves, is it?
That's right. We are known as AARP because almost 50% of our members, it may be in fact more than 50% now, are still working. So people have changed what they think of as traditional retirement, and that's great. And we've changed to accommodate for that, to make sure that we are truly reflecting what our members need us to in terms of being their fierce defender and wise friend.
Ah, wonderful. Okay, Jess, starting at the federal level, what are the issues that are major concerns to us and for our older adults?
At the federal level, always at the top for AARP, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Those are the three big issues that impact millions and millions of Americans across the country. And AARP has those as a priority every single year.
So what is AARP doing to address these national priorities?
Let me start with Social Security. Social Security is a program that helps people. They've paid into it through their working years, and it provides some financial stability as they retire. However, the program is not able to pay 100% of benefits indefinitely. So we've got to make some changes, and AARP is urging members of Congress to do that, make changes to Social Security so that just like current beneficiaries, everybody in the future can get 100% of the benefits that they've earned. Now on Medicare, it's a little bit different. Medicare, of course, is the program for people 65 and over for health care. That health care program, just like health care all across the country and in every state, has changed through time. And we've added components that help people to be more healthy, thank goodness. Things like a prescription drug benefit. But we continue to fight to make sure that people have access to Medicare, access to prescription drugs, and of course, that they are affordable.
Oh, okay. So moving to the state level.
Yes.
And I know that AARP Massachusetts gets to weigh in on a number of issues, but I also know that there are priorities for the office, and each state has a list of priorities, each legislative session. How are these priorities determined for each state?
So AARP does have an office in every state, and we do get to define our priorities. but they're based off of what the AARP board sets as the priorities for the organization. And then from that, we filter down to what is happening in each state. So, for example, in Massachusetts, we have put an emphasis on health security by helping family caregivers and making improvements to nursing homes and long-term care systems. And then on the financial side, we think that it's really critical for people to be able to save for retirement. And so we're urging legislators here to pass laws that would help people save for retirement, and then also to help with senior property taxes, because we know that people want to stay in their home and community, and sometimes having a little bit of relief from those property taxes can allow them to do that.
Moving back to the nursing homes, what are the kinds of things that you're hoping to accomplish with, I guess it's nursing home reform at this point, right?
It is. I would first say that what our members and other older people tell us consistently is that they want to stay in their home and community for as long as possible. That being said, we have to make sure that the system to help them do that is robust and available and affordable. So home and community-based services are critical. But if you're no longer able to stay in your home safely and you need a nursing home, we think that it is imperative that that nursing home care is quality care that is accessible and affordable. And the COVID pandemic really put a spotlight on what we know has been true for quite some time. There are deficiencies, and we must address them. And what we have said to lawmakers in Massachusetts is they must act with much more urgency to address these things. We have to reform some of the long-term services and support system. We have to make it better. Those are our loved ones, and we are asking others to care for them when we cannot, and it must be done. So things like greater accountability, more transparency, making sure there's enough staff for people who are doing the care, in that there are enough staffing people in there to do that care, and also to make sure that the physical space is changed to accommodate things like having one person per room rather than many people in a room and spreading an infection. That infection prevention, we learned, is really critical. So those are some of the things that we're working on.
What are you proposing about property taxes?
Well, on property taxes, we have urged lawmakers to look at it more holistically and think about all the pieces that are in a person's consideration for whether they would stay in their home and community. One of the bills that we are supporting would do things like changing the interest rate. So right now, when you defer your property and then you have passed on and your family has to then deal with the selling of your home, the local municipality will get the money back from your property taxes. As I said, it's a deferral. It's not an abatement. You don't get rid of it. But that inflation and that amount that people have to pay for interest is very high and out of line with the current interest rates. One of the things we think we can do is change the interest rate to make sure that more reflects what is the current interest rate. Also, we can do something, for example, to change the number of years that you live in the home. Right now, it's a minimum of 10 years. Well, if you've moved to your home 3 years ago and you need some assistance by having a property tax deferral, it doesn't matter if you lived there 10 years or 3 years. You still need that assistance, and changing the law in some of these ways would really be helpful. We know people want to stay in their home and community. They really value that, and we should make it easier for people to do that.
Jess, something else that's on the table that I know is the family caregiving tax credit. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course. So across the nation, AARP has put a lot of attention to figuring out how to help family caregivers. They are the backbone of our care system in this country. And these people are not paid. These are the unpaid family caregivers. So they are doing this primarily because they love the person they're caring for. But if you took the number of people that are doing that care and how much it would cost for each of them to do that care, if you put a dollar amount, it's billions of dollars. In fact, in Massachusetts, we have 790,000 family caregivers. And if we were to calculate a dollar amount for that, that would come out to $15.1 billion every single year. Caregivers are spending, on average, $7,200 out of pocket. That's in addition to whatever the care recipient already is paying for different things. We know that people do this because they love their person. Maybe they're spending it on transportation. Maybe it's because they put in new grab bars to help their loved one get up the stairs easier. Whatever it may be, it's a lot of money. And what the Family Caregiver Tax Credit in Massachusetts would do is give a $1,500 refundable tax credit. To people who are eligible, there are income limits, there are eligibility requirements. You have to be able to, it's only for adults. It's caring for another adult. This is not caring for children. So I think that there are some really critical pieces to this family caregiver tax credit, and helping those 790,000 family caregivers to be able to continue to care for their loved one would be so important.
Oh, I know it is. As a caregiver, that really resonates with me. Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about the Work and Save, and why is that necessary?
Work and Save, Secure Choice, the Core Plan, these are all programs that, if passed and expanded, would allow people to save for retirement from their paycheck. So what do we know? 60% of Massachusetts residents have no way to save for their retirement through their employer. Seems astounding, right? 60%. Now, we also know that the easier you make it for people to do something, the more likely they are to do it. If you offer a plan at the workplace, we have data that shows people are 15 times more likely to enroll. And if you make it automatic, where they have to take an affirmative action to get out of it, they're 20 times as likely to save in that program. We think that's a really important thing. Social Security was never intended to be your sole source of retirement income. It's an absolute critical component of retirement, but it's not meant to be the only thing in retirement. And helping people to save for retirement is critical. And so the Work and Save program, the Secure Choice program, the Core Plan, expansion, all of these, if passed, would allow people to save at their workplace. And we think that that is really, really important, not only for today's situation of people having enough money to retire, but also into the future. Every time someone is not able to retire with financial security, that impacts their family and future generations. We really have to get a way of doing this and making it as easy as possible for people.
Oh, that is so true. That is so true. So those are the AARP Massachusetts priorities. Have they all become bills? Are they all bills now?
They are all bills. So as you mentioned at the top of the show, we are just at the beginning of the process. So they've all become bills, and they're all getting moved to committees. Now the committees will all have a hearing, and they'll deliberate, and that process continues for quite some time, but we're just really at the start, but they've all become bills. And if people are interested in finding out all the details on what I've said, they can go to aarp.org/MA and find all the information about what I've just spoken about.
Okay. Now, those are AARP Massachusetts' priorities. But what are some other issues that you're seeing, especially as you talk with legislators and new legislators to offer AARP as a resource, but also to get a feel for what their priorities may be? what are the priorities that they're having, especially for older adults?
One of the things that we have heard consistently as we've met with legislators this session is the need to address housing and all of the components. As I said, everybody tells us they want to stay in their home and community. It may not be the home that they've lived in for many years and raised their family. They might want to move to someplace smaller or more accessible or more easily, navigable with, less steps or something like this. But if that's not an option for them in their community, then what options do they have? They can stay in their home or they could move somewhere else. And people like their communities. They may not necessarily want to be in the house that they lived in, but most people like their communities. And so housing has consistently coming up. How do we make it easier for people to stay in their home and community? How do we make it easier for people to navigate around their community? Transportation is another one that we heard. Yes, people like the independence of driving, and we know that people want to continue to have a car, and that's great. But we really need to think about all the physical space. What about when someone walks or bikes? As we've said to many legislators, that a good community has a physical space that is good for a mom pushing a baby in a baby carriage, or someone riding their bike to school, or someone walking down the street with a cane because they just had their knee fixed. So all of that makes sense in the community. We've really got to do a better job at thinking through holistically, how do we make our communities better?
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about some of the concerns and conversations we've had with members and who are really concerned about affordable, accessible housing, especially those who probably have, lived most of their lives in homes that have 3 and 4 bedrooms and they're now living alone, empty nesters. What are some of the problems and issues associated with that?
The physical space of having a big home, especially a big home, is, we've heard from legislators and from AARP members and others that they would like to be able to potentially have an accessory dwelling unit that would allow for either a caregiver family to move in, or maybe for them to move into that unit and have someone else that they love live in the other bigger home, so that they can stay there. One thing we know is that if you are not currently a caregiver, you probably will be in the future, or you're probably going to need care. And so as we think about the homes that we currently have, how do we make accommodations to those homes so that we can stay there? One way is to have an accessory dwelling unit. It allows someone that you love to live with you, but not right in your physical space.
So what's preventing us from having, as we call them, ADUs?
ADUs, right. So a couple of years ago, Massachusetts passed and AARP supported the Housing Choices Law, and that allowed for a change in some laws at the local level to pass accessory dwelling units, ADUs. What has to happen, though, is that every community in Massachusetts has to take it up. So that's 351 times over. That's a lot of doing over and over across the state. And each community is now trying to figure that out. How do they expand their housing options? What does that mean for their community? And so AARP has been supporting programs and services to try to help educate on that particular issue across the Commonwealth, because we think that that might really make some good sense. And the law is in place now, and so let's give people the tools that they need in order to make those changes.
Okay. We're also hearing, I certainly have had conversations with people who are very much interested in downsizing, but with the high cost of housing, high cost of real estate, it's really hard. I mean, even with appreciated value, it's hard for them to find homes or places to move in their own communities. So there's this whole missing middle, right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Thank you for raising that. That is a critical piece. As I mentioned, while you might want to stay in your home and community, you may not want to stay in your big home. And going somewhere else that meets your current needs is missing. AARP just put out a report called the Missing Middle Housing. And this is a term that we've now heard from legislative leaders and the new governor and the new lieutenant governor. They've raised this issue because we've got to be better at building that to accommodate for people who want something smaller, something different, but want to stay in the community that they have grown to love. So we've got work to do there.
Yes, we do. Jess, I've seen you do this work, and you do it so well. Why is it necessary for regular residents, citizens, especially volunteers, to get involved in this work? What can they do? What do you recommend they do? How can they help?
The first thing I would say right away is to contact your legislator and get on there if they have a newsletter, or if they have office hours, or if they have community meetings set up. Right away, find out what those are and get involved that way. That's the first thing. The second thing is there's lots of organizations that are doing this work in Massachusetts. AARP is one of them. And if you want to be part of what AARP is working on and making sure we understand our priorities and why they should be advanced, then it's very easy. You can just email AARP. It's ma@aarp.org. So I would say that we are always happy to have more volunteers helping us move this dialogue. This is really critical. Legislators really do listen to their constituents.
Before leaving, what is the one message you'd like to leave with our audience?
If you have to have one takeaway, it's that your voice matters. You are a difference maker. Even if it's small, even if it seems like you're not doing something right now. The process is long, but each added voice makes a change.
Oh, you're so right, Jess. Thank you so much. And thank you for your passion and all you do to elevate the voices of older adults, making sure that their voices are heard, and for taking these voices to legislators. So thank you so much. And thanks to you, our audience. Know that we, the people, have the power and the right to take a stand on issues that matter to us. Contact your legislator. Let them know how these issues are impacting your life. Use your voice, tell your story, and most of all, vote when it's time to do so. Join us again next month for another episode of Connect. Until then, let's commit to taking a stand on important issues that matter to us as we age. And let's stay connected by reaching out to our loved ones and neighbors, especially those living alone. Visit us at inlonelinessma.com to watch past episodes of Connect, to learn more about the task force and how you can become involved in this work. Thank you so much.